Thank you very much. First of all, I just want to apologise. I ran in late through the door there as I was just jumping off the bus from Canberra, straight back from the 10 Embassy, one of the oldest and best standing examples of sovereignty we have in the country. And for better or worse, and for all of its history, that place brings a lot of love and a lot of memory to me. And I think all of us here on this stage today are where we're at because we hold part of a story and a memory of this country that once you know it, you can't stop fighting and you can't let this go. This is an incredibly important discussion, and no matter what side it takes, it's reverberating all across the country. It's simmering underneath the flow there. Now, I also want to acknowledge where we're standing today because I was very much a child of the Redfern movement. I'm descendant of the Gumbaynggirr mobs, but I was born of the Ghana Hills and raised of the Ghana Plains down in Adelaide. I'm speaking today from my personal experience, not on any past position I've had as a speaker or delegate. I'm just speaking for myself tonight, and I want to make it clear I'm speaking in my opinions, because by the end of it, I probably could be up for a defamation suit or two. But this talk needs to happen. Before I get started, we made mention of Yalara and the constitutional recognition, which I'll get this out of the way early because it's more of the painful part of the discussion I want to have. I went out to Yalara. I wasn't invited. I made my own way up there. I hitchhiked across the country. I even missed the first day because I got stuck out in Eldunda, the shitty little roadhouse between Alice Springs and Uluru. I eventually got a lift with a guy who trained camels for the racing and discovered that they once sold a camel for $80 million for a camel beauty shaving competition, and thought that some of my communities might be in the wrong business at the moment. When I got to Yalara though, I witnessed something. I kind of knew what I was going to see, but what I saw was an exercise in manufacturing consent. I saw good hearts and minds being spoken down to and filled with kind buzzwords until the point that they were nodding, without any thought or ramification of what was happening. I saw over a 2-day period them trying to fast track through an agreement that should take a hell of a lot longer to discuss than that. Worse still, I went out to Mutijulu, the community actually in the shadow of the rock, the one that's supposed to be getting the benefits of this multi-billion-dollar Yalara resort. And I saw a community in poverty. I saw a community still under the orders of the Northern Territory intervention. I saw a community that didn't even know the meeting was happening down the road. Not until half an hour before they got a forward buzz and the buses came rolling in for everyone to get their photo op. I then saw Tiwi Island dancers shipped in to do the welcoming ceremonies on Mutijulu land. I saw dumpsters of food being thrown away after every lunch and dinner whilst the community down the road was starving. I saw delegates that didn't even know why they were there, thinking they just won a holiday or a free trip to Uluru. I saw good people that spoke out, kicked out of meetings, and then held under armed guard because they'd been threatened with traditional spear rings. I saw every level of management out there, and still they couldn't get what they wanted. Even before Recognise got to that point of that final collection, every time it hit the ground in the communities for community discussion, there was a familiar message. Shove your constitution. And I think this is kind of important at the moment because we said it before, but they need our legitimacy. We don't need theirs. Our living existence is proof of who we are, and we don't need to prove nothing to them. They constantly want to make us play games and play in the courts or dance a certain dance in order to prove who we are. We're not going to conform to this colonial apartheid bullshit of people telling us who we are and that if we don't conform to that, we're not who we are. Whoever the hell we want to be, and we always have been. We're a strong people, and we've been here for time immemorial. I think it's really important that we remember this, and quite frankly we do. It's the reason we're all here. It's endemic of the Australian government and the Australian national conscience that has never been able to plan long-term for the future, because it's the same fear that presents it seeing and acknowledging its past, which is the same fear that prevents it from seeing a real outcome or real future for this country. We don't have that problem, which is why we have the opportunity to be the real leaders in this country, because we're the only ones that can see this country for what it is. We're the only ones that hold the key to the soul of this country and the story of this country, and there's no way that this conversation is happening without us. And that's what they're trying to do at the moment. They're trying to select very carefully who can be on this treaty discussion. They're only talking about this because it's convenient to them. The funny thing is, we mentioned terra nullius before, but it's a really funny thing when you start going through the history books. You don't see terra nullius hit the pages anywhere up until the point where they're approaching federation. The biggest lie is that they didn't know any better back then. They knew better. They knew exactly what they had to do. We're talking at the height of the American Revolution and the height of anti-abolition discussions in the UK. Terra nullius doesn't reach the books until you see a country trying to federate, and like a bad accountant that's been embezzling all this time, they're looking for a way to clean up the books and find a loophole to justify what they're doing. History is also interesting if we look at why we're in the situation that we are today. Like brother said, we've got to take this country with us. Everyone's here on the ground, and unless we can be the leaderships to show ways of healing this system from bottom to top, no crumbs on the board treaty is going to do anything except give them that final go-ahead to finally rape and pillage the rest of these lands. So unless treaty is a killing blow of the colony, it could actually be the final nail in the coffin for this country. We have to be so incredibly careful. As it stands at the moment, when we're in Yulara, we saw the incredibly amusing sight of Noel Pearson suddenly turning around and go, "Oh, we hear you guys. We heard that you don't actually want constitutional recognition. We heard you want treaty. But the only way you're going to get it is my roadmap to treaty." And I was flabbergasted at this. And I think I actually may have spied it just walking in the door here. You've got a kind of little cool book out there by Lindsay Nolan, who I think's in the audience here, Driving Disunity. This book is more important than ever at the moment because it's been one of the first to expose the connections between Black corporate Australia and the Business Council of Australia, and how fundamentally overridden and how much control of our movement has been ripped from us through these corporate backers and by co-optation of our movement. Redfern is important because it reminds us that in a period of a couple of years, we did what the white liberal do-gooders couldn't do in 50 when we took control of our movement back for ourselves. That we had articulate people who knew the issues, who knew the struggles, who knew the truth, and would not be afraid to say it and make Australia confront the mirror and confront the difficult questions. Now, I might swear a lot and make a lot of vague stereotypes about the Australian public, but quite frankly, I think I've got more respect for them than the Australian government does, because I respect our ability to deal with these difficult conversations and deal with these difficult ideas. And we're not going to have a future until we do that. So unless this treaty is talking about honestly confronting this history and the position that we're at, unless it starts off from a point where we say, before we can even talk, we have to show that there is no active aggression. You have not given up your war against us yet, so how dare you think that we can have a discussion that's not under pressure or under the point of a gun? Hands off our land and children before we even talk. Because we see the same thing happening with Recognise that we saw in the 1967 referendum. Go back and look at that referendum, because all the school kids will tell you it's when we got our citizenship and voting rights, and that ain't true. The word of that referendum was, should the Australian federal government be given power to legislate for Aboriginal people? And that is still the same legislation today that is causing things like the anti-intervention, the basics cards, the forced removals of children. The road to hell is paved in good intentions, and the Australian people have been too often ready to walk that road. We really need to be open-eyed and bear witness to what's going on, but quite frankly, we can't trust the Australian people. We said it before, we need international monitors in this situation. This is not a discussion the Australian government can have honestly and in-house. It is proven time and time again that trust is not there. But for all our fear of the possibilities that could come out for this could possibly be one of the most exciting discussions to ever happen, because the answers aren't there. And I'm a firm believer that we can't concentrate too much on this end document or what it's going to look like. The trick is to force them into that conversation in the first place. They made the mistake of saying the word, so they said it. Let's have that conversation. It's going to be the longest and most painful conversation you've had in a very long time. But after, we're going to have a cup of tea, and we're going to have a second conversation, and a third. Because that's how it's supposed to be. From day one, we should have been having conversations. So quite frankly, I'm of a position where if we are going to talk about treaty, the only thing we should be accepting is their surrender. And it may seem harsh, but quite frankly, after 200 years, we've won. On every fucking level. We've won morally, we've won legally, we've won spiritually. We're still here, we still hold our stories, we still hold our connection, we still hold every memory of every atrocity you've put forth on people and land of this country, and we will not let you run from that. But we're here to help make it better. Why the hell do we want to be recognised in their constitution? It's universally acknowledged as one of the most racist documents in the world. We have to acknowledge the part Australia has played in the entire world's history of these issues. Whether it's producing the policy that, I think very relevantly, created apartheid in South Africa, considering Duttons are so desperate to get those white farmers over here. And I think this proves another point. Between Sunrise and Dutton recently, can we truly say that this dream of eugenics assimilation and Australian white apartheid has ever truly left us? It's with us stronger than ever. But there's a big difference between governments and their people. And I believe it is the only way that this is going to happen is if it's a people-led movement that jams the government into forcing its own secession of its rights, and that we show how to heal a system of bringing it back to parliaments of 51% majority, back to circles of consensus, bringing back levels of community control from the lowest point on the ground, because no matter where we're coming from in the country, we know the most efficient and sustainable solutions to our problems because we live them every bloody day. That we stop saying that my people's culture and law is dead. I'll tell you right now, our knowledge is based on the scientific method. It's based in observation of the land. I challenge you tomorrow, go outside and sit down in a space for 5 hours and look at the land you're in. Know the land as it changes by the seasons. Watch everything that passes. And you'll find those secrets will start coming back to you. And you'll realise that a lot of those stories we tell you are just some cool aesthetics on something that's bloody plain as day, and always has been. We are in an opportunity here where we can take hold of this conversation. But the question is, how do we do it? We know we can't play their game. Like brother said, we learn how to play the game, and believe me, we learn fast and we learn good. But it doesn't help when they keep changing the goals. So the trick is, how do we flip this board? How do we chuck those pieces all across the table and say, you're playing my game now? We put them on the back foot. And believe me, it's right for it. Like, I had the displeasure of meeting Turnbull last year. At the last minute, Clinton Pryor, when he got to Canberra, made me his speaker to hand over the demands in the Prime Minister's courtyard. Not only did I see a man who I can only describe as, I've never met a human being so belligerent and spineless in the same exact time, and that the utter fear in his eyes, for all his money and all his power and position, he was a petty, afraid man who had snipers trained on us from the courtyard windows of the Prime Minister's garden. To this day, Australia is still epitomately afraid of the black man, and even more afraid of the articulate black man, because we hold the pulse of the country. We see the same in you and me, that unless we combine our revolution with the working people's revolution and bring everyone with us, our system was based on equality and prosperity, of all of us playing our roles of civic responsibility in maintaining this land and looking after each other. These ain't ancient systems, these are the main staples of all societies on the planet, and has been for longer than it hasn't been. So when we talk about treaty, we're talking about your liberation. We're talking about a moment where we might be able to jam this country up once and for all, force that mirror up to its face and say, do you want to keep walking this way? Or do you want to turn, and do you want to walk with me? I will help show you the controls of how to manage this land, and we're going to work and do this together, because if we don't, none of us are going to have a place on here. I don't want to see half my family deported. We can't even really, we've grown up a little bit. Like, we used to talk black nationalism and like kicking everyone out of the NT, and oh, they were great days, some great conversations through there. But we also know that we're living in a modern world today where if we do get any levels of autonomy, they punish us by the liquidity of financial capital. They withdraw services. They play games of economic segregation on us to force us into a position where we no longer have choices. So that's why we take the whole table or we take nothing at all. And the beautiful thing is the thing that damns this country could also be what saves it in this situation. The fact that it's predominantly a white, Western, English, developed democracy saves us from getting our asses bombed like any other nation that would try to do something so drastically social. Because when they hurt us, we can speak the same language and we can be heard for our grievances. And even if they did help, this country has more than enough to sustain us. We produce all the agricultural resources and mineral and all the things we could possibly need. We'd produce 10 times the level if we actually got back on board of producing the stuff that actually grew here, and not wheat and cotton and other dumbass things. But the thing is, I think there's an element of the people that are waiting for that vision, of everyday Australians that have not heard a political vision for the future for a long time. And their bastard representatives have sold them all underneath the river. They've been so afraid of our land rights for 30 years, they don't realise all the land's been sold off from underneath them. Furthermore, it was never theirs to begin with. 90% of this country is owned by 25 individuals who are the vast majority of the inheritors of the squattocracy. Now, why the hell aren't we looking at them? For crimes against humanity, crimes against our people, why don't we look at issues like nationalising the property of the squatters and bringing them back under public scrutiny? A public resource that could fuel a lot of these changes, give us oversight to say, do the people have a vote of where is mined and where is not? That there are some things that should not be touched. And that we get out of this bullshit cycle of seeing politics merely as an economic issue. Because, quite frankly, even if it was an economic issue, none of your major parties have a leg to stand on for economic credentials. And these surpluses may look nifty, but when they're on the back of 100-year leases to mineral rights or 100-year leases to timber rights, divvy that number up by 100 years, and I guarantee you, it won't be looking so great. And that's not just an issue for everyday Australians. That's intergenerational tyranny. It's taxation without representation. And it is it's pulling down the temple to, it's not good future policy. We're the only ones that can do this, but we got to find a way to take back that conversation. It's already starting to happen. All around the country, and I've travelled a lot, I see a lot of groups talking about their versions of sovereignty or their versions of self-organisation, from whether it's mob battling in the courts or it's mob just simply laying that line in the sand and saying, stuff you, you're on that side, I'm on that side. People all across the country are finding ways to fight back. The trick is, how do we weave these different groups in and get the conversation coming together where we can help each other and work out where we've succeeded, where we've failed. That we don't try and homogenize our own movement, and none of us here to have the right to say our template is the only template to go. But we have to find a framework to bring us all together and make that patch quilt of diverse mob have a nice big table to sit at. Because at the moment we don't even have that table. But when it comes to the time, and again, this is my own personal opinion here, I believe we've got to do something drastic. And now everyone talks about national gatherings happening in Sydney, Canberra, Alice Springs. I might be a bit biased from the lands I was born on, but I want people to start thinking and start having a talk about Ghana country, about Adelaide. Because I think we sometimes forget the place that played in the movement. And I think we sometimes forget about geography and about our ability. Like, we used to put so much effort into mobilizing resources, buses, vehicles to get people where they need to be. Because we know that the only thing we need is the people in the right places at the right time, and we can get the stuff done. But now we force our mob to fly halfway across the country. Hell, it's cheaper for me to fly to Europe than it is for me to fly to Alice Springs. And yet we expect the mob from the desert, or the mob from Western Australia, to be able to get to these meetings where unfortunately a lot of the time we just talk. We can't do stuff like Yalara. We can't do this over a weekend. We need some kind of concentrated, long discussion and action in a place where it cannot be ignored. So this is why I'm talking about Adelaide. If you're familiar with the place, you'll know it's got a nice big park belt surrounding the entire city. I envision mob one after the other slowly send up their circles around that band of park, to the point that we've laid siege to an entire national capital. That every day we discuss between our circles, the first coming working out their templates that they can share with those that come later. That our communities back home support those groups to be conduits back to their communities, not God-given speakers with the rights to deal, but conduits. That we force this conversation to happen in the open, not behind the doors of convention centres like Yalara, but in the old city squares. Tandanyanga, the original ceremonial space of the Ghana that they now call Victoria Square, used to be the great meeting place. It's conveniently been retrofitted to almost be an amphitheatre right now. And I can't think of a better place to have discussions without walls so everybody can witness, black or white, that we know what the hell we're talking about, and for them to learn and listen to us as well. This might be a way off, but I know that we're getting there. We have that fire. We know something's on our doorstep. The real trick is not going for what's easy. And I see it with my old uncles, my own family, the old fellas that fought for everything. And we've lost too many as of recent. And I know people's heads are wearing heavy and they think that this might be all they can get. But fuck, after all this time, we've survived the strongest and most consolidated genocide program in history. We can fight this out to the end. Like I said, we have won. Don't let them think that we're coming to the table alone and to surrender. It's their throat we're looking for. And when we do, not only will we come all together with our mob, but we'll come with the vast majority of the Australian people backing us up as well.